Hello, this is Tommy Franks. Welcome to the 4-Star Leadership Podcast, a product of the General Tommy Franks Leadership Institute and Museum. We're here to get a view into the lives of the legacy makers, the movers and the shakers of today, to offer insights from the full spectrum of the leadership community. We'll talk to former 4-star students and explore their leadership development path. We'll work to find out what they are about today and learn from the opportunities they've made for themselves in this world. It's my distinct pleasure to welcome you to this podcast. Remember, leaders are not born, they're developed.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Core Principles of Leadership with General Tommy Franks. I'm your host, Dr. Jill Green. We are on episode 29, and our guest today is Piyush Patel. Piyush is the founder of Dream Big and best-selling business author of Lead Your Tribe, Love Your Work. Piyush has become an innovator in corporate culture as he grew his former company, Digital-Tutors, into a leader throughout the world of online training. Piyush has worked with industry leaders, including Pixar, Apple, Ford, and NASA, and has been featured in Inc., Forbes, Fast Company, TechCrunch, and Entrepreneur Magazine. After selling Digital-Tutors, Piyush continues to advise other companies and is an angel investor helping startup businesses make their mark. Piyush spends his time helping companies grow their revenue by leveraging their greatest asset, their employees. Today, Piyush and I will be discussing how his entrepreneurial spirit and drive helped create a common vision within his company, as told in his book, Lead Your Tribe, Love Your Work. Before we get started with Piyush, let's hear from our major sponsor, REI Oklahoma.
REI Oklahoma is proud to be a part of the General Tommy Franks Leadership Institute and the production and distribution of these podcasts designed to inspire leaders and difference makers. At REI Oklahoma, we have been working with small business leaders, entrepreneurs, and people who are driven to succeed for years. Highly motivated people working to own their own businesses, live in their own homes, and make the world a better place. Since its beginning, REI Oklahoma has continued to identify hurdles and deliver holistic solutions to create job growth and help neighborhoods thrive in both rural and urban communities. REI Oklahoma looks forward to visiting with you about helping your business and community grow. Visit reiok.org or call 800-658-2823 to start the conversation.
The LaBar family is a fourth-generation Oklahoma family. That may not sound like a long time, but our grandfathers were born here, within the Comanche Nation, before the land runs. We are the proudest sponsor of the Tommy Franks 4-Star Leadership Podcast. We hope listeners will heed the words of these distinguished men and women who have served our country at the highest levels and across all walks of life.
All right, so it's great to be with you today. This is my first time with the podcast, with the 4-Star Leader Podcast. I began as the executive director back in January. So when I began to think of people to have on our podcast, Piyush was one of my first people that I thought of. We worked at the same college, not at the same time, but he was there long before I was. But when I got there, he was kind of a myth and a legend of Piyush. Everybody talked about Piyush and how wonderful he was. And I was in development, so I was able to award the scholarships that he began for the digital media students in the Digital Media Institute that he actually began there. So that was my first meeting with Piyush. And then a couple of years ago, I was able to hear him speak, and he has an amazing story. So I really wanted to share him and his story today with our students and our listeners. So with me today is entrepreneur, best-selling author, speaker, and angel investor Piyush Patel. Thanks for coming to or joining us today, Piyush.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, so we're going to start off by, can you just tell us a little bit about your background?
Oh my gosh, I've got a wild background. So I was born in London. My parents moved to El Reno, Oklahoma when I was 4 years old. And so I call myself an Oklahoman. I've grown up here and went to school here, graduated with a elementary ed undergraduate degree. I've got a master's in adult ed. I've gone to a whole bunch of different schools across the country. And I'm currently settling in, working on another master's degree in marriage and family therapy, as well as I am about 30 days away from becoming a PhD candidate in human sexuality.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing. So you didn't just, once you built your company and sold it off and began all these other companies, you didn't stop with your education. You just kept going. So that is amazing. So let's talk a little bit about your book. You call it Love Your Tribe on it. So we are geared toward our younger, leaders that are, in college and, starting their careers and that sort. So with that Love Your Tribe kind of falls under our character of caring that we believe in. So can you kind of describe how in your work environment, how caring comes about and why that's so important?
Yeah, so my primary business was teaching people who make movies and video games. So we worked with visual effects artists from all walks of life, all around the globe, who were working on movies and video games. And so, I kind of had this adage at the office that, look, we're not saving babies or dolphins, right? But what's the worst that's going to happen? Like something didn't work out. Well, that's okay. We'll figure it out. So, we're in the business of figuring things out. And so showing a little bit of grace and allowing people to grow as individuals, as artists, as themselves leaders, that's really the focus that we want to put on. Now, I've told this a bajillion times, and I still believe it. Given enough money, you can pretty much hire anybody. That doesn't guarantee that you're going to get their heart and passion. You really have to earn the heart and passion. And that's really what sets companies apart, especially when they're smaller and they don't just have bodies that they can throw at a problem. You really want to get people's heart and passion of solving problems.
So with that also, you've talked a little bit about it's not necessary, when you speak of tribe, it's not just you, your employees, it's their families too. So how do you embrace their families?
Oh my gosh. In the summer, I always have a movie day for all the kids and their parents. And it's interesting because you get coworkers together at lunch and they're talking about work or they're talking about the movie they're going to go watch. But then you gather them up as parents and they're all talking about kids and where they're going to school and what they're working on. So really thinking about the business as not just a place that employs people, does a thing, and you go home, but more of a community. We are all intersected, and my attitudes around work affect your attitudes around work, and so on and so forth. So if we can create a trusting space where people can feel comfortable saying, hey, I've got kids and I've got these challenges, no problem. Let me pair you up with somebody else who also has kids who may have that challenge. Allows them to solve that for themselves so they can then solve the company's problem.
So within your company, we're dealing with younger students and sometimes even for me in my, almost 50, I'm not there yet. Sometimes it's a little, they're just kind of wired differently than I am, even,
Absolutely.
So within your company, how do you handle, the different generational gaps and that sort of thing to get everyone in a cohesive working environment?
That's a really tough one because of the word cohesive. Each generation, actually each individual, brings this unique set of skills. And I think it'd be really foolish to say, let's whitewash everybody to be equal and we just want the same output the same way we've always done it versus, wow, you are really good at this particular topic. Let me leverage that and help this other person who's not really great at that, but they're really good at this other area. So, in our world, that could be like somebody who's a great programmer just may not be a great conceptualist. Well, I can plug them up with somebody else who is a terrible programmer, but an amazing conceptualist. And together they can work to solve problems that really there was no other way to solve it.
So when you began your company, back when you were teaching, So how did how did that concept come about? How did you choose the people that you wanted to start that company with? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, I started with $54. I was like, no investors, throughout the whole company, no debt. It was just my wife and I. And the reality of it is, I taught at the college. I don't know if you heard this, but I taught 42 credit hours per semester. That's a lot.
That is a lot, yeah.
So, and my students took 42 credit hours per semester. And so what that meant was you come in with your gen eds and you will graduate in one semester. And, I didn't realize how hard it would be on the teachers because we were going 7 days a week nonstop. Class was 6 days a week, 8 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., half-hour lunch, and we took no holidays. So this was a real production environment situation. And then most of the teachers volunteered Sundays to come in. Mind you, the school didn't pay us for 42 credit hours. Right. And they're like, well, the most we can kind of pay you for is 18. And I was like, well, that's better than the 12 I'm getting. I'll take it. But then my wife got pregnant. And it was easy for the students before my wife was pregnant because I lived across the street from my lab. And so the students would wander over late at night or on Sunday afternoons, and I'd just wander back with them and fix whatever problem they had or retaught them what they needed. And one day when my wife was pregnant, she's like, hey, the kids can't just come ring the doorbell at 11 o'clock at night. I said, yeah, you're right. So I spent the weekend in our little guest bedroom creating the content and the curriculum that I was going to teach. And then I just gave it to the students and said, instead of the book, why don't you watch my videos if you get stuck? And they quit coming. So I just kept making more and more content. And then over the summer, I just sat down and just worked and put a lot of this on the internet, and boy, it really took off. So it's not like it is today where we didn't have the competition of YouTube or Google. We were really just a few people in the space doing this. And we just stayed true to being a niche, just teaching everybody else how to do it.
Yeah, so you kind of started out of a need from your wife, and it built into something that became, purchased from Pluralsight for what, $45 million? Is that what it finally sold for? So
plus some change. It turned out to be about 100 when it was all done and said.
Oh goodness! So when you decided to sell your company, how did you approach your employees with that and let them know?
So that was a tough one. You never know when you're going to actually officially sell your business. You could sign all the paperwork, and if the wire does not come through, you have not sold a business. That's kind of the last part of the transaction. And so, I gathered up all my people, and, I was at a point where I was having some health issues, and I was really concerned, like, what am I going to do with this business? What's my wife going to do with this business? And is this a chance for me to exit and allow the business to grow beyond myself? And so that's what I decided to do. It was a really hard decision, but I sat my employees down, and we gave the 42 full-time people, we divided up $10 million amongst them as just I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but this will give you some runway. And the way we did it was $1,000 for every month that you had worked for us. Wow. And so we just wanted to celebrate the loyalty and the amount of time that they had given us out of their career, and give them a little bit of a head start. Some of them paid their houses off and cars off and student loans and became debt free. And some of them went out and bought a bunch of new stuff and still have debt. So, you can't fix everybody, but you can give them a chance.
So, can you kind of talk about before you sold your the company? Can you kind of tell us? I love your story about your park bench. Can you kind of go into that story for us?
Yeah, like I said, we were just a small business. I had no background in business. I had no background in marketing. I literally just wanted to teach people. And all of a sudden this became a monster. I mean, it grew really fast. The challenge for us was we were shipping plastic DVDs all around the world. And when you're shipping plastic DVDs around the world, they get lost in the mail. People send them back for refunds. And then you've got to now deal with this plastic. And then also you've got inventory issues. So one day I said, let's go streaming. And now today, that is just normal language for us. But you would have heard me walk in just mumbling gibberish. They have people like, what does that mean? I said, we're gonna go all online. Like, we're just gonna go all in. At the time, it'd be 3 more years before Netflix started that process. So customers really didn't understand, but it really worked. My customers understood. They're all tech people. So they were like, this is great. I don't want to go back to plastic. The challenge with that was we grew so fast. I mean, we went from $1 million to $3 million in revenue in 1 year. And most of that went to the bottom line. And when you grow that fast, it's hard to figure out what's making you grow. But at the time, I thought it was because of me and my ego. So it became a monster that had to constantly get fed. And I took my leadership team to Napa to celebrate. And I had one incredible employee who, in the middle of the celebration, said, I quit. I quit. I don't want to work with you anymore. You've lost the real why of what we're doing and our core values. And all you care about is, did the revenue come in? And I had to really stop and look at myself and think like, wow, what am I going to, like, is this true? Have I become that person that I've never wanted to become? I went from always 24/7 wanting to be a teacher to now make as much money as I can. And so I spent an entire night sitting on this park bench in Yountville, California, which is 10 miles north of Napa. And I just sat and I watched the sunrise come up, and I went through all of the emotions of embarrassment and anger and fear and depression. And I realized when the sun came up that, you know what, I am going to go make a difference. I asked that person I said, hey, your plane tickets and the hotel room's already been booked. Why don't you just give me the weekend, help me turn this around? And so we did. And I'll tell you, years later, after I sold the business, I tried so hard to get this bench because it symbolically really was the fork in the road where either I stay, on this narcissistic path, or I pause and I go back to who I am. And I'm glad I did, and I'm glad she was brave enough to share that with me. I own that bench now. It sits in my backyard, and I find myself sitting on there a lot, just reflecting on, I don't say I'm lucky, because luck just means it just happened. I mean, I worked really hard, but it pauses me to realize, hey, it's easy come, easy go. It happened on the bench, and it could not have happened on the bench.
Right. So she kind of brought you back to reality and let you know that, the vision that you were, gearing yourself toward was not the vision of the rest of the company.
That's right. And I had to get my head straight. And once I did, the growth was unstoppable. All of a sudden, people in my company realized, okay, he's not in it for the money. We're here to change the world. And so we grew super fast.
So yeah, that's just an amazing story. So, and a lot of people would not admit to that. They might just keep going and let the money drive, where it went. So,
that's right.
And I think that shows also from your employee that, the caring that she had from, for you and the company as well, for her to, voice her concerns. So I've always just loved that story from you. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you bet. It takes, I call it, you have to have trust and vulnerability to make great decisions. And excuse me, to get trust and vulnerability, I need honesty. And to gain honesty, I need intimacy. And, when I say that in business groups, people go, intimacy? Oh, is everybody going to get naked in the hot tub? I'm like, no, that's not what that means. What that means is if you share information with me, I will not weaponize it against you, especially if you're trying to look out for me. A great example of that would be like, Kyle comes into my office and we're wanting to buy this little company, and I've tasked him with doing it. And I've already got my heart set on buying this little company, and off we're going to go. And he comes in and he says, Piyush, I just don't think we should do this. I've ran the numbers 3 times. It's just not a good fit for us. And I go, okay. Well, the next meeting, I find something and I bring it to the group and I go, hey, everybody, I found another great little company. But, Kyle here is probably going to shoot it down again. Well, I just weaponized. He tried to protect me and tell me the truth. Right. And I turned it against him. That destroys trust and vulnerability because I broke the intimacy with him. And so our organization was all about building these things, yet I wasn't practicing it. And fortunately, she was brave enough to remind me of how important it is to practice what you preach.
That is a great lesson. So, you are an angel investor also. So can you kind of tell me what that means?
Yeah. So I invest typically before institutional or professional investors step in. Typically, I'm investing in the person. The company hasn't quite solidified yet, but I do it with limited funds. So it's kind of like going to Vegas, right? You got your little wallet of what you're going to spend, and what you're going to spend is what you're going to spend. So right now, I've got about a dozen companies that I'm involved in, and I don't bring a new one on until I've exited one of those.
Okay, so you say that you invest in the person. So when you're looking at a person, I'm sure that their character and certain things like that come into. So what, makes you decide to invest in a person?
Well, it really boils down first to their company. Are they solving a problem that a customer is willing to pay for? That really is a big piece of it, right? We've got a lot of people who are being trained, getting degrees as entrepreneurs or entrepreneurial studies, going to boot camps. And the message they're getting is have a great pitch deck, have a great idea, and go raise money. And I don't know if that really makes you an entrepreneur outside of a fundraiser. So I want to take a step back and say, hey, you've got this little business going and you're wanting to really scale it. I can help you do that. But I'm not the person to figure out if your idea is good for customers. I really need you to have some paying customers that are wanting their problem solved with your solution and are willing to, pay for it.
Yeah. So we have a program that we do with our students. It's called Understanding Community Understanding. And that's really kind of how that works is we want our students to go out into their communities and it doesn't have to be a big problem it can be, a lot of them did things during the pandemic to help other students in mental health and, knitted hats for cancer victims and, things like that, but we want them to understand, how to go out and solve a problem. So that's really kind of what you're investing in these small businesses.
That's right. That's right. And with the goal of scaling them, to much larger.
Right. So you're just kind of that. You're just, you're helping them with your knowledge, going to the next step. So yeah, that's great. So, you've also talked about, I love when you talk about what, your parents thought you should go to college for. So, and we've all had our parents. I was supposed to be a banker. I was going to be my father told me I was supposed to be an FDIC bank auditor, and that's what I was supposed to do. So I started in finance, and now I'm running a nonprofit. So our lives go in so many different directions. And I think that's important to let our young students know that, our roads, and they have so many forks in them. But can you kind of explain, because in your culture, your background, certain things are kind of expected. Can you kind of, give some information on that?
Yeah. So, my background, my parents are from India and neither finished high school. And so it was really, they were just trying to figure it out. They showed up to the United States with $16 and they have worked from 1978 till just last January, almost 7 days a week, no holidays. They have just worked. They have worked their hearts out. And they were like, we don't want that for you. If you want to do that, you come on right in. We've got a business and you can run this thing just like us. But if we want to change our generational trajectory, we need you to go get education. And so I was like, okay, what do you want me to do? And they're like, well, you could be either a doctor. I'll give you three choices: a doctor, a lawyer, even an engineer, or a disgrace. Like you can kind of pick from the list. And I was like, well, I don't want to be a disgrace, so I'll do engineering. And, I went down that path, loved the classes, but it's not the kind of impact I wanted to make. I had some really incredible teachers growing up that saw something in me and told me, hey, you're going to do something big one day, kid. And I was like, wow, having somebody believe in you like that, that's incredibly powerful. And I wanted to do that as well. So I find myself as a junior switching majors to the College of Education and taught middle school math and science, specifically science.
So when you made that switch, you were by no means, a disgrace, but what did your parents think of that?
Oh, they were like, are you kidding? How are you going to, pay to live and take care of a family one day? And, they were right. Teachers are not paid with.
Education is tough.
It is really tough. And the challenge I have is I want to live in an amazing state and I want to live in an amazing community. And to do that, we need really smart people to solve problems that don't exist yet. And so, bickering over not paying teachers, I just don't understand. That just does not compute. If you look at other world powers, they really focus on education because they know that next generation are going to be the wealth earners, and we need really smart people, not just consumers.
Right. So that with that, General Franks last year, when he was speaking to our students, he said, our generation has messed the world up. It's going to be you that fixes it. So,
that's right.
I mean, it's really true. So, that's why we take such, passion in creating great servant leaders for our next generation.
Short break while we pause to hear from one of our generous sponsors.
Hello, this is Jay Zacharias with the General Tommy Franks Leadership Institute and Museum, and I would like to tell you about one of our partner sponsors. His name is Justin Krieger, and he has worked as an independent insurance agent at Krieger Insurance Agency in his hometown of Hobart, Oklahoma since 1999. Justin is honored to help with the annual Celebration of Freedom event and has been a board member for the General Tommy Franks Leadership Institute and Museum for many years. He is also a fifth-generation farmer and rancher in Kiowa County, where cattle, crops, and even insurance is sold with a handshake. Give him a call at 580-726-3076 or come by the office if you would like to speak with Justin Krieger or Kathy Lankford about insurance. We are thankful to our customers and friends who have supported us through the years. Again, Justin would like to say how honored he is to live in such a great country and how proud he is to help sponsor these podcasts. Please enjoy the rest of this podcast experience from your friends at Krieger Insurance Agency.
That's right. When I started Digital-Tutors, it was all about how do I get to teach the way I want to teach? How do I take an adult learner who's got things to do and work to get done and give them the solution that they want in a way that they are empowered to then go, wow, I know this inside and out. I can go apply this to my job. Because if you think about it, our entire world has changed. But if you were to take a picture of a elementary school 100 years ago, it kind of looks the same.
It really does.
Yeah, and the whole system was built to create factory workers, right? That's why you have the bells and the breaks and the lunch period and everything is, sit in a row and do it and turn it in and follow this process. And it was to create lots of factory workers. Well, we don't really need those workers anymore, right? We need the workers that can build the robots, who can, design the factories, who can figure out shipping issues. These are all things that we need people to solve. And it's not going to happen out of a traditional classroom, unfortunately.
So a lot of our students, they are members of so many different, clubs and organizations and sporting and do, so much, after school activities and, just volunteering and everything. And there's so much stress when it comes to students, 16 to 20-year-olds. What would you tell them about, how to handle that stress? Because, I could see it kind of the same as, when your company's growing at such a rate, what kind of stress that would be.
Well, I'm terrible at what I call work-life balance. I am just terrible. As you can tell, I'm in 2 different schools and running a bunch of companies and, thinking about a dissertation. So I'm all over the place. But I'm a big believer in work-life integration. The idea that I need to stop thinking about this and then start thinking about that, that's a hard ask. So that's the first big step is how do you integrate your work, your life, your family, your relationships into one bucket where you're fulfilled, 360 degrees. The second part of that in terms of stress is I always ask the question, why? Why do you need to be in 10 clubs, right? Mm-hmm. Is it to impress, a selection committee? Well, you can just pick one and you'll probably do the same, right. So it's the why. Now, if you get a tremendous amount of energy and fulfillment out of being in 10 clubs, add an 11th, right? I'm all about that. But if it's all about for a third reason, which is somebody else's approval, mm-hmm. it's going to be stressful, right? I've had very stressful days, and not many of them were within the business. Those were ones that I just loved. I loved people I worked with and the problems we got to solve.
Mm-hmm. So when you sold your company, did you take any downtime? Was there, time with your family?
Yeah, I tried. Unfortunately, I'm just not wired that way. And, for me, the big challenge was just this massive identity crisis, right? So I did this for so long. It was my identity, my world. And I signed a fairly strict non-compete, which really didn't allow me to go work anywhere else or be a part of that world anymore. And so when you're kind of the, key figure in this industry, and then you wake up one day and you're not, I was a little aimless for a while, and it's really taken me a number of years to just anchor back down into, okay, who am I? What am I trying to do? And how can I make the next biggest impact?
Right. So when you had your company, and even now, when you are looking to hire employees, when people come to you, the, recent graduates, young, go-getters, what are you looking for in an employee?
So I am looking for a match in passion, a match in care, a match in effort. Here's a perfect example. I will have young people right out of school come and interview, and they've got one copy of their resume. Well, we always interview in pairs. So there's always me and somebody else, or two people and that person. And we always ask, you have another copy of your resume? And they go, no, I just brought one. Okay. That's in our mind a little mental note of, you're not really prepared. They don't bring a notebook and a pen. So I know you're only going to remember 16% of the conversation. So if you haven't taken a note, you're not going to follow up. You don't know who's in the room. You haven't made a note of the names. So these are all things that we look for. Then I ask, what do you know about us? And I can't tell you how many times I've interviewed hundreds of people where they look around the room for any clues they can have, and they go, you guys are into comic books, I think, marketing company, I'm not for sure. And I'm thinking, okay, your entire life and career is in my hands, and you haven't done any homework. And so the right way to do it is, here's what I tell people that are out hunting for jobs. A few days before your interview, drive to that location. Figure out how long it takes to get there. About 4:45, park in the parking lot or on the street. Look at how people are dressed, how they're coming out. So that way you're kind of matching what they're dressed like, just one step better. Do your research on them. Don't just go to their website. Read the reviews about them. Search them on forums. Look at them on LinkedIn. Find other people who work there. See what they're interested in, where they've worked before. And what that does is it creates this ability to say, hey, I want to be on your team, and I kind of already know your team. And that's why I want to be here. That's a way better prepared employee for an interview than somebody who's like, I don't know, the job looked cool. Oh, okay. Well, I don't know how much value you can bring to us if the job just looked cool.
Yeah, that's what, this was my first year interviewing students for our leadership. And that was the first question I asked them is, what do you know about 4-star leadership? And a lot of them were very prepared. You could tell that they had researched. And then some were like, my counselor told me about it. I thought it'd be pretty cool. So, and you remember that. So,
that's right.
We're different from a company, but you want them to know that, working there or attending our leadership program, it's it's a great opportunity, and you want them to understand that and be excited about that. And I think that preparedness comes from excitement. So
yeah, I also have, we hire lots of design people, and they'll bring me, they're full of ideas, and I'm like, that's great. I love full of ideas. But let me ask you a question. This person that you're going to work with next to you has 15 years of experience as a designer. Now, you brought me your portfolio. In this book, is any of your freshman work in here? And they're like, no. How about your sophomore work? No. Any junior work? Well, I got one piece out of the 12. Okay, so you kind of only been doing this for maybe a handful of months, right? So your day one is learning. You've got so much to learn because the school just prepared you to enter the doors, right? Your ability to continue learning is what's going to keep you in the doors. I always tell folks, if your business is growing, you got to tell your people to be prepared. If the business doubles in revenue, is your intellectual ability going to double? Right? Is your capacity, is your speed going to double? It's not. So you've got to constantly be learning, constantly be looking to hone that edge, because just being there longer than everybody else doesn't give the company an advantage. There is a component of that longevity, that domain knowledge, but that's not a guarantee.
Right. And that's kind of, with our leadership group, all of these students are wonderful. It's what we're looking for are those ones that actually use that information that we give them during the week from our leaders that have poured their, expertise into them, and how they've used it and grown with that. So we have some, amazing alumni that have gone out and done wonderful things. And then we have some alumni that, just kind of didn't take some of the expertise that was given to them. So,
but maybe they did, and maybe they're applying it in a different way.
Well, and
right?
that's, and you hope that maybe, they could definitely be a late bloomer like me. I didn't finish my college, I finally got my doctorate when I was 45. So, they could definitely be a late bloomer like me. And you hope that some of that information that was, instilled in them when they were 17 and 18 years old was actually, it's in there somewhere. So you are definitely right on that. So, so can you kind of explain, what your company, other than looking for, you have employees and you're looking to invest in, small startups that have, kind of figured things out. Is there anything else that your company is working on now?
Yeah. So, in the next few years, we're going to pivot into pretty much a mental health facility focusing on owners and founders. So, there are lots of life coaches out there and business coaches. But what I'm finding is that the entrepreneur or the leader really is the lid of the organization. And oftentimes it's childhood trauma that is limiting their belief that, hey, I can go do this. A great example, I met a young man who, he was like, can I meet with you? You're in tech. I just need some help. I'm sure, let's have coffee. And we sat for a few hours and just chatted. And I said, well, help me understand, what's the big issue you're having? It's like, well, I'm not making any money. I'm doing my work and I'm booked all the time, but I'm not making any money. Well, what do you charge? And he said, well, I charge $200 a website. And between you and I, these were like $20,000 websites. They were really, really good. And I said, oh, well, the old me would have said, well, God, just charge more. And there you go. Add a zero and then add another zero and you're good. But now I know to ask the question, well, why do you charge that price? And he said, well, I'm just kind of a people pleaser. Okay. And what makes you think you're a people pleaser? And he said, well, I saw my dad beat my mom, beat my brother, beat me, and we ran away. And deep down, I still want to make him proud. And I said, let me tell you something. When you get that resolved, right? I can't help you with that, but there are a lot of people who can. When you get that resolved, you are going to be unstoppable, because that limiting belief is stopping his success. And I'm finding that more and more as I kind of pour through cases and research. And so that's kind of where we want to position ourselves, is the ability to work with entrepreneurs, their founder, the families, their children, in a way that helps them reach their goals from a mental health perspective.
That's amazing. So this kind of knowing your worth. I mean, you've got to dig deep and figure out, what's holding you back. So that's amazing. Right. So my daughter she just received her master's in counseling. So
oh, great.
That kind of warms my heart that you're leading in that direction. So I'm pretty proud of her. So we also instill communication to our students, and communication is not only speaking, it's also how you listen. So have you ever had a time that you've had to listen to someone and your views are extremely different than them, but you know that the way that they're doing it is best, and you've had to kind of switch and pivot directions?
Absolutely. All the time. I hope I'm doing that every day, because I don't know everything. And there are people who are really good at what they're doing. And I may have an opinion, but that's all it is an opinion. They may have experience. They may have knowledge, and that trumps opinions all the time. And so I want to create that space where they can excel at whatever they're good at. I need to kind of give them the tools and get out of the way until they're stuck. And then I'm there to help pull them out of the mud if they get stuck in the mud.
So I've always been told that you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. And so that means you're supposed to listen more than you actually talk. So I think that's an important message to our young leaders is, you're not going to come out and know everything. You have to, advice is given to you most of the time in a very, caring and passionate way, because they want you to grow. So it's important to actually listen to it and understand, what someone is actually trying to help you with.
That's right. When we say the word tribe, what we really mean is here's a collective group of people, and we want to have a similar outcome, right? For some people, that is making sure my house payment gets paid. Yep, I want that outcome for you as well. Mm-hmm. We can't do that if we don't have satisfied customers. If we don't have satisfied customers, we don't have the income for you to make your house payment. So once everybody understands, hey, if the company does well, we do well, right? If the company does well, my house payment gets made. Well, then we're all in this thing together, and we've got to communicate. So my job as the CEO is to break the ties. I'm supposed to listen intently and let people decide how to run the company. And when they're locked up 2 against 2, my job is to make the decision, and everybody needs to get on board with it. And that's just how we do it, right? If 3 people out of the 4 say we're going to go this direction, we expect the other person and myself to go, yeah, let's do it. You guys are experts.
Yeah, to hop on board and
that's right.
Follow that vision. So I was listening to another podcast that you were on this last night when I was mowing the lawn, and you talked about catching the small mistakes before they build up into big mistakes. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So a number of famous basketball coaches really drilled tying the shoes. First week of college basketball was tying your shoes, untying your shoes, tying your shoes, packing your bag, unpacking your bag, mix everything up, repack your bag. And finally, after a week, one of the players was like, Coach, when are we going to learn basketball? And he's like, you're learning it right now. He goes, if your shoes are not tied correctly, you're going to form a blister. And when you form a blister, you're going to shoot just slightly different. And when it boils down to the game-winning point, you're not prepared to win, right? You haven't done the little things. If you don't pack your away bag correctly, and we get there and you forgot your shorts, well, then you don't get to play. And that could mean us losing the game. And so I'm all about that, right? We do a little activity called the 3 Happies, which I talk about on my website and talk about in the book extensively. And it's just a really simple, I don't have one in front of me, but it's a little Post-it note. And we write 2 things that made you happy at work and 1 personal. And we put the name and date. And then we all put them up in an area where everybody's going to walk by, which is right by the bathroom. Everybody walks by the bathroom. Uh-huh. Well, I go check every morning at about 9:15, and I am just looking for name and date. Did people put the name and date? And I can't tell you how many times I catch a little mistake where they forgot the date or they forgot to put their name on it. And I go visit with them and say, hey, I reiterate what they wrote, and I go, hey, by the way, we always put the name and date. And they always go, oh, you're so right. I'm so sorry. My kid forgot his backpack this morning and I'm a little frazzled. Well, that frazzle would have lasted all day long. And in our organization, we all touch the product. And so if it's your job and your head's not in the game, you're not going to perform at your best. And so I think big problems start as these little bitty micro problems. And if you can just kind of get in front of them honestly in a fair way, then you're not having to have a meeting with somebody because you no longer like their behavior, but you never put a stop to all the little things or course corrected the little things ahead of time.
That's a great point. And, little things they'll build, and, even in it can cause a paper to be, incorrect. I can remember my English teacher. She would, if you did not cross your T or dot your I, the entire paper was wrong. But that has been, that's been almost 30 years ago, and I can still remember that important lesson that she was giving me, is, make sure you're paying attention. These are what you have to do. So that's been instilled in me. So,
well, the younger kids the younger generations are used to, Control Z. Let me undo that. Oh, I didn't win this round. Let me play again. And it's just easy to just, let me try again. Let me keep trying. Unfortunately, in a business environment, the customer doesn't really give you an undo.
Right.
And if they do, it's much harder to overcome the fact that you failed them the first time. And so accuracy, showing up, being a hard worker, that stuff is just table stakes. Elon Musk just came out and said, working from home is immoral. And I was like, I've been trying to figure out a nice way of saying it. That makes total sense, right? So he pretty much says, why do you get to work from home, but the person who has to come and fix your toilet can't? Or the person fixing your food, or at the grocery store, or your mechanic, or, all the other trades that require you to show up because you're a knowledge worker. Innovation doesn't happen in a closet in someone's house. Innovation happens amongst people solving a problem, but not over Zoom. And so, I'm a big proponent of face-to-face and being together and solving problems. And companies that really leverage that, you see, move so much faster because they're iterating the process so much faster.
That is a good point. So with our students, they come from, we have international students and we have students from every state that come. With backgrounds like that, sometimes it's, different beliefs and cultures kind of sometimes clash. As a business owner and, CEO, how do you handle situations like that?
Real simple. Respect. So I'm a veteran. The Army brings all walks of life. But at the end of the day, we respect each other. We're here to get one job done. Whatever the job at hand is the job at hand, and we're going to respect each other. I always kid around with my son. I have one child, and I always tell him, I don't know if you would be my favorite if I had more than one child. And he looks at me like, what are you talking about? I go, if a favorite means one, I can't have one, two favorites. And he's like, I can't believe you'd say that, Dad. And I said, you just have to remember, I love you, but I may not like you.
Yes.
Right? Your behavior, I still love you, but I may not like you. So I do the same thing with my folks at the companies. Like, look, we are from all different worlds and we have all different beliefs, and that's okay. That's what makes us unique. And that's our super advantage of being in the United States, is we get to work with so many different people and different experiences. So instead of bickering over it, we need to leverage it, right? We need to be at all places and solve as many customer problems as possible, which gives us the best chance of surviving. And we got to do that with respect, right? So we may not like each other, but we can love each other.
Yeah, that is that respect. And General Franks, we teach our students that you can disagree without being disagreeable. So, you have to listen.
That's right.
And, there might be something from another, individual that, that just might spark something in you. So you have to have the compassion and ability to listen and the respect for them before you can become a better person.
That's right.
So
that's right.
I think we're about done, but if you could give 17-year-old Piyush any sorts of advice, what would it be?
I would tell myself, start earlier. I think I was an entrepreneur my whole life, I just never believed in myself, and I can't do this or I can't do that. And it wasn't until I kind of got pushed up against, like, what do I do? Then it was like, I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I've started lots and lots of businesses, and you're never too young to start. Every one of your graduates this summer should come home and have start up a small side hustle, right? They can produce AI art, sell it on Etsy. I've got friends who make thousands of dollars a month, passive income, and they just got to file their taxes. That's all they got to do. So, it's one of those where we've got to change the mindset of selling my time and getting a paycheck for my time versus I'm going to create and then build a market and allow people to buy even when I'm sleeping. And so, encouraging everybody to really think about what can I do this next year that is passive income and get into it.
I appreciate your time today, Piyush, and
my pleasure.
I'm hoping that sometime you can come speak to our students. I know that they're going to love you just as much as I do. So I appreciate you making time for us today, and thank you for all that you do.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on your show.
All right. Well, you have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you again to REI Oklahoma for making this podcast possible. For nearly 40 years, the board, staff, patrons, and supporters of the nonprofit economic development REI Oklahoma are committed to expanding Oklahoma's economic prosperity, earning the reputation of being one of the most comprehensive economic development organizations in the country. Business loans, training workshops, business consulting, and networking opportunities, as well as technical assistance and even commercial business space, are made available to Oklahoma entrepreneurs and small businesses. For low and moderate income individuals and families, down payment and or closing cost assistance is offered. Learn more at reiok.org. This has been the 4-Star Leadership Podcast. Now it's your turn, 4-Star listeners. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and let us know what you thought of this episode. Be sure to give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcast and tune in next month for our next episode that airs every last Friday each month. Go be great.
The LaBar family is a 4th-generation Oklahoma family. That may not sound like a long time, but our grandfathers were born here, within the Comanche Nation, before the land runs. We are the proudest sponsor of the Tommy Franks 4-Star Leadership Podcast. We hope listeners will heed the words of these distinguished men and women who have served our country at the highest levels and across all walks of life.